The story of the Divine Comedy is told by Dante, who's the first-person narrator. It's intended to contain an imaginary autobiographical element, not in the sense that he literally took a trip to hell, purgatory, and paradise, but rather that it's a story of his own spiritual struggle. In this sense, the work's about him as a Christian pilgrim. Thus, the use of the first-person narrator isn't entirely appropriate. Augustine's Confessions, which traces its author's long road to accept Christianity, also uses this technique, which some people at the time would have regarded as self-indulgent. But with the importance of the individual in Christianity, this also makes perfect sense. The autobiographical element is evident at the outset of the Inferno, which begins as follows, quote, "Midway along the journey of our life, I woke to find myself in some dark woods, for I had wandered off from the straight path." Dante is, of course, not saying literally that he was in a forest. Instead, this is an allegory intended to reflect his own spiritual and mental state of mind. It indicates that he was in a frightening and unsafe place. He himself is confused and uncertain. It's not uncommon in life that we sometimes wake up to find ourselves in trying situations, and we must ask how we got there. The so-called midlife crisis is a real and well-known psychological phenomenon, and so Dante's description of his own state of mind at the midpoint in his life certainly has a plausible ring to it as a kind of self-reflection. The biblical reference here is presumably Psalm 90:10, which conceives the human life to consist of 70 years. Thus, Dante begins his spiritual journey in 1265 at the age of 35. Dante is heartened when he sees the sun appear over the distant hilltop. This gives him hope that he can again find his way. The sun can be taken to represent hope or Christian faith in general. Dante thus attempts to climb the mountain, but is prevented from doing so by first a leopard, then a lion, and finally a wolf. Each of these animals is a symbol for something that stands in the way of achieving a Christian faith or a Christian life. Again, they're not physical animals in the real world, but instead are parts of Dante's own inner life. There's much debate about what exactly these three animals are intended to represent, and it's true that the detail of Dante's allegories often makes it difficult to identify every image precisely. But it seems clear that the fact that they are animals tells us they are representative of nature. In this case, the natural drives and desires that all people have. For example, the lion is associated with hunger, a natural drive which always returns. Similarly, the wolf stands for sexual desire. These drives prevent us from realizing our spiritual side, the highest part of our being, which we share with the divine. Thus, the three animals represent human sinfulness. Just as in the Confessions, the young Augustine struggled with his own natural side, so also here, this is Dante's way of saying that these drives and desires continually stand in his way, preventing him from living up to the standards of the Christian life. These animals indicate Dante's need for spiritual help if he's to find his way again. This too is also something intuitive to the reader, since we've all had important people in our lives who have at one time or another served as intellectual or spiritual mentors to us. Thus, Virgil is introduced into the narrative. He will be Dante's first guide and will lead him through hell. Since he's a pagan author, Virgil cannot be Dante's guide in paradise, where this role is taken up by Beatrice. But yet, Virgil is the appropriate guide for Dante here, since he has been Dante's great poetical model, teacher, and source of inspiration. When Virgil identifies himself as the poet who, quote, sang of that just man, son of Anchises, who sailed off from Troy after the burning of proud Ilium, Dante thus here at the outset connects his work with the Aeneid and the epic tradition. Although he's clearly important to Dante personally, Virgil as a pagan is still confined to a subordinate role. This is emphasized in the second canto, when Virgil explains to Dante how it occurred that he came to his rescue. Virgil recounts that he was commanded by Beatrice to come to help him. Beatrice, in turn, was told by divine grace, represented by the female character of Lucia, who, in turn, was called to action by the Virgin Mary. There are thus three Christian female figures representing different levels in the divine hierarchy. All three of them have been involved in assisting Dante by providing him with Virgil as a guide. Virgil himself is thus a subordinate subject to the commands of the Christian ladies. The first canto represents, naturally enough, a kind of introduction to the entire work. Thus, it does not count as belonging to the Inferno, strictly speaking, which begins with the invocation of the Muses in Canto 2. This parallels the beginning of the first canto in both Purgatory and Paradise, where the assistance of the Muses is also referred to. This first canto is the extra one that brings the total number in the work to 100, with each of the three parts containing 33 cantos. As an introduction, it contains elements that reflect the different parts of the poem. The dangerous forest is clearly an anticipation of hell, while the slope of the hill that Dante is prevented from ascending represents purgatory. Finally, the sunlit mountaintop is a symbol for paradise. In this way, Dante gives the reader the first inkling of the complex structure and symmetry of the work from the very beginning.